Hi, welcome to Weed Schooling. My name's Scott, and today we're going to talk about preparing your dry shed, part 1. So, first we're going to start with a supply list and initial prep. Okay, so these are things that you're going to need for drying your flowers. You're going to need string. We're going to use the string to string up lines that we're going to actually hang the cuttings on. You're going to need, before I get to the rest of these things, we're going to talk about the ideal drying temp, because that's going to play into how these are used, and it's going to make a lot more sense to you on why you need them, because obviously thinking about heaters right now seems pretty crazy for a lot of us. So the ideal drying temp is 68 to 70. So you don't want the flowers to dry really quickly. 1 to 2 days is too fast. Ideally it's like 4 to 5 days. That's kind of the prime time. And the reason for that is when they dry longer and have a longer curing process, the flower is going to look a lot better. It's going to look more vital, and it's also going to preserve and bring out more of its flavor and taste. If you ever dried anything just in the sun, you notice it really shrivels up. It dries really quick. So most certainly don't want to dry it in the direct light, and really want to go for that 68 to 70. It could be on either side. You go down to 65, you could go up to 72. So there is a varying range, but that's our ideal. So I talked about what happens if you dry it too fast. Now what happens if you dry it too slow? The issue with drying it too slow is mold. The celebration isn't always over right when you cut, because there's still a process when you can get mold. So the battle continues, and it can happen in the dry shed. We've been part of gardens where people had an amazing harvest. It went in the dry shed and no one was maintaining the temperature. No one was dumping out the dehumids, and mold spread throughout the dry shed. So you need to be on it the entire time. So maintaining that temperature and being present throughout the whole process is really important, so that mold doesn't happen in the dry shed and also in the curing process. That's another space that it can happen. So this is your ideal temperature. Now there are times when you want to dry it really quick and you want to raise that temperature real high. You want to put you want to turn your dehumidifier all the way up so it's sucking as much moisture out of that room. And those times are going to be when you've harvested some things that have the mold spores in it, and you're concerned that it might grow in the dry shed. Now it's rare that it'll grow really very quickly. So I mean, you could increase the temperature a bit and try to get it dried in a few days, but ideally you're not going to do that, and you can monitor it a lot more quickly so that you're not drying the entire crop that you have in that room quickly, because you really want to dry it much more slowly for the best and finest looking and tasting and smelling flower. So something to start preparing right now as you set up your dry room is monitoring how are you going to get that temperature. Now obviously it's going to change. Some of us aren't even going to have our first harvest for 3 weeks. So this is something that maybe you don't do right now, but maybe in 2.5 weeks, a few days before you start harvesting, you want to start seeing how you can maintain this temperature. So these are some of the supplies that you're going to need for maintaining this temperature. One thing that you're going to want is a thermometer, and certain kind of thermometers are obviously going to be more beneficial than others. They have these digital thermometers now that you can get one that goes in your dry shed, and sometimes you can get a few linked up. So if you have multiple dry sheds, you can put them all, and then you could have your master control unit that tells you the temperature, and it'll tell you what the low is and what the high is. That way you don't even have to be looking at it all day. You could try to set your temperature, and then in the morning you can look to see how low it got and also what the high was for the day. So obviously there's a lot of ways that we can monitor this temperature to really keep it there. So there's going to be fans. They're going to obviously help keep it a little bit cool, but also the fan is going to keep the air circulating, which is really important for getting the drying to go smoothly and also to avoid mold from proliferating. So dehumidifiers, essential. You can get them at Home Depot, you can order them on Amazon, many different places you can get dehumids. They're going to help suck the moisture out of the air and keep the drying process happening. Dehumids is something that you want to be on top of. You want to make sure you're emptying them 1 to 2 times a day. If you're putting a fresh cutting in there, you want to be emptying it sometimes 3 times a day. It really matters what's going on. If it just rained and then you put it in there and it's really wet, you're going to want to be really being on top of them. So heaters, obviously this time of year heaters seems really crazy, but you may be harvesting all the way through mid-November. So it might be not something that you're monitoring right now, but as you get into harvest, something you want to keep in mind, because you don't want your temperatures to really be dropping below 60 in the night. You really want to keep the drying happening the entire time. And you certainly, if you live somewhere where it's moist and in the evenings it's getting really dewy and you're letting the temperatures drop, then it could rehydrate the room. So something we want to be on top of. AC is something that's going to come into play now, because we don't want the temperatures getting too hot, it'll dry too quick. So now's a good time to really start monitoring the higher end of your temperatures to make sure you can keep it in this range. So these are the ways that we're going to control the temperature: the fans, the dehumids, heaters, and AC. Thermometer we got. Markers and tape. You're going to use tape to mark your lines so that you can know what strain you've got. And also after you harvest it, then after you take it off the line, so you put it in the bins or containers or jars, whatever you can mark, and you know what strain. Helps to know the date when you put it on the line, so you can gauge how long it's been hanging on the line as well. And markers, so you can mark on the tape. So depending on the size of your harvest, there's different ways to cure it. So there's bins, there's containers, there's jars, and there's even paper bags. So I've been part of gardens that have done the full range of all of these. We use bins and containers because we're gonna pull in 400-500 pounds, and drying it in paper bags and jars is just not an ideal way to go. So we use big Tupperwares, and then you're gonna fill those Tupperwares about half full, and that's where you're gonna sweat and cure them. We'll have another video coming out later which will go over that in much more detail. But jars, more on a smaller harvest, some people like to cure in jars, and you can get bigger mason jars and you can put it in there after you've taken it down from the line. But jars can be a little bit more challenging because you're gonna have to clip off all the stems before you put it in the jar. So another way to go is paper bags. So paper bags, after you take it off the line, you could put it right in the paper bags and you can roll up the paper bags, and it'll help with the curing process and the sweating. And sometimes if it needs to be rehydrated, you can wet the sides, but that's only if you've gone too far in the curing process. So the ideal for us is really bins and containers. You can maintain and regulate the moisture a lot better in the curing process. Turkey bags are essential for just putting your finished product in. You can also do some sweating and curing in the turkey bags, but most of it's going to be done in bins and containers. So again, this is just part 1. In about another week or 2, when we start building out one of the dry sheds here, we're going to get in there and do a whole video on how the dry shed's built, how we put up the lines, how much spacing we give between the lines, how to do an upper line, a lower line, how to set up drying racks that don't have to necessarily be attached to the wall, and also trays. Some people like to just dry on trays. Also, when you get a lot of smaller little popcorn buds that aren't connected to a stem, can't hang on a line, it's nice to have a tray to dry them on so that it can be used. So thanks for joining us for preparing your dry shed. Please stay tuned for part 2 and other things we got coming for you on harvest, curing, a lot of other good content. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share, and anything else good that you got for us or want to share with us, please do.